I'd like to take the opportunity now to go over a variety of German field equipment that, based on the conversations I've had with American World War II veterans in Europe, that they picked up and they brought home as a souvenir. So, what we're going to begin with is item over here, the helmet. So, German helmet from World War II was based on a helmet that the Germans used in World War One. They modified it in 1935. Between 1935 and 45, there were some changes, but I'm not going to go into details for that. This particular helmet, going by the color, it's blue, was used by the German Air Force. Now, whereas the Americans had a helmet that had no specific size, you could adjust it. The German Army actually did issue their helmets by size. And whereas the American helmet had a liner you could take out and you could actually use your helmet, for example, as I mentioned, to cook food. The German helmet, it wasn't true. It had a piece that was made of leather, the liner here. It had a steel band you could adjust, and then in terms of the height of the helmet, it had this little string where you could adjust the height. Also had a chin strap. The difference is that the German chin strap, it's a late night, it's been a long day with a day job, was leather. And just like the American, they generally didn't wear it attached, but they usually attached it to the top of their helmet. Over here, we have a second German helmet. Once again, leather system for the suspension, and as you can see, it has a leather strap. You'll notice that there's two differences between the two. The first being the camouflage cover. Once again, it's late at night. So, it was not uncommon for, once again, the Germans made extensive use of camouflage, that they would use an item, it's called the Zeltbahn. I'll go into detail for that later, where they would use this to make material for items such as a helmet cover, a uniform jacket, or pants. So this particular item was made from a German tent, essentially. Has a loop right here where you could attach an item such as pieces from a tree. But you notice right here, this black piece, it's inner tube from a tire. And they realized that you could take this rubber piece, put it on your helmet, and then further attach additional items for camouflage. Another item was this cap right here. If you had an opportunity to look at my American stuff, it's called the side cap. This was initially the piece of headgear adapted by the German Army about 1936. Had a little flap here on the side. Just like the American piece initially, it had a piece right here that indicated your branch. Now, for the German Army, they used the color white for infantry. And just like the American cap, put it on your head, centered it, the side canted it. They realized there were some deficiencies in this cap. You got to remember that the Germans fought in Europe, particularly in Russia, Central Europe, where the weather was much colder than the United States. So they adopted a second hat right here. It was based on a cap that was used by the Austrian army during World War I. Why? Because Austria has the Alps. So one of the distinctive features of this cap was its flap. And it was designed so that you could pull it down over your neck and the back of your head if it got cold. I'm going to demonstrate that right now. I'm going to take my glasses off for a moment. And it was rather quick. So what you do is you took the bill of the hat, you put it like that, put it over your head, and as you can see, in under a minute, my ears are covered as well as the cover right here underneath my chin. Now I gotta find my glasses. Once again, this is an item that American soldier would have picked up and would have brought home. What's distinctive about this cap is that just like the uniform I showed earlier, it has a distinctive device right here. It's a pair of oak leaves for the German Jaegers, the light infantry. The only other unit that would have had a device sewn on the side of their cap would have been the German mountain troops. And it was a flower in the German Alps called the Edelweiss. As I already mentioned, the Germans realized real early the importance of camouflage uniforms. And it's been my experience, when the funds permit, for 30 years acquiring German as well as American uniforms and field equipment, that the German side is definitely much more complicated. If you remember from the earlier presentation, I mentioned that the American soldier had his haversack, and he carried in the bottom of it half of his tent with the poles. A little bit different for the Germans. The Germans had an item that was called a Zeltbahn, and that being a shelter half. It was adopted in 1936, obviously made up until 1945. And as you can see, it's camouflage material. However, it had two different types of camouflage. One was for the spring and summer, and if you opened it up here, basically a fall pattern. The German soldier carried 1/4 of a tent, that being one of 4 pieces. Why is that? The idea was that if you had to go ahead and set up your tent, which of course you had your poles and stakes, 4 guys would get together. This could be buttoned up, look like a pyramid. 3 guys would be inside of it. The 4th guy would be outside on guard duty. In addition to being a tent, it was also a camouflage uniform item. It was your poncho. And what they had right here was a slot that you unbuttoned. Take my glasses off once again. So the intention was that it was your raincoat. So you had your wool uniform on to stir the rain. You need to protect yourself, stay dry. Sorry, I forgot to do a button, but you get the concept. You would have pulled it over your head. Don't have time to undo the button. Like I said, it's late at night and I'm doing this fast. But you get the concept. You took that slot, you pulled it over your head, it went over your shoulders, you wrapped it around your legs, you buttoned it up. So you also had a poncho, but you also had the advantage of a camouflage uniform on top of it, so you could stay dry. Next item I'd like to go over is this piece of equipment that in English was called A-frame. It's shaped like the letter A. I like to refer to this as the German infantryman's duct tape. Why is that? Because it was extremely versatile. Made of cotton, had 2 long leather straps. It was intended to be worn on this piece of equipment, which I'll go into detail really quickly later. But if you can think of anything that you wanted to carry on your back, this was it. It was an extremely versatile piece of equipment. In this particular case, you can see I have strapped to it a German shelter half called the Zeltbahn. Next piece of equipment I'd like to go to real quick is this. It's a German gas mask. Once again, just like the Americans, the Germans realized that the possibility would exist that gas would be used again. Unlike the Americans, who often when they were issued their gas masks, they threw them away. If you look at photographs of German soldiers up until the end of the war, they were required to have this with them at all times. It's a steel cylinder. In this particular case, we have a bag made of cotton. Inside of it would have been a large piece of waxed paper. And the intent of that was that in a time of a gas attack, you would put on your mask, you would pull this out. It was usually worn in your chest right here, and it would also protect you from blistering agents. Later in the war, this is a required item. As you can see in this particular case, someone took some leather straps and put it on it. Can was easy to open. Pull the top. Here's your mask. Filters down here. This one is obviously a bit old. You could see that you'd think after 75 years that you'd be able to open it. So obviously the rubber's become very brittle and they can't do so anymore. Obviously you have two lenses here on the mask. Seeing that it is German, it's over-engineered, and that on the top of the mask you have right here an extra set of lenses. Should the lenses in that mask go back. Once again, you carried this up until the end of the war, always required to have it, always had to have a mask in it. You couldn't take the mask out, throw it aside, and put food or anything else in it. So, we're going to go over your basic German field equipment. Basic part of your German equipment was this leather belt, and you had a buckle on it. Initially, it was made of aluminum. By about 1941-42, they started to go to steel. One of the distinctive features of this belt was how you adjusted it. You can see right here is a series of holes. And what you had on your belt was two metal prongs right there. So all you did was slide it on your belt, adjusted it to the position you needed to be in, you pushed it forward, and you were good to go. There's your aluminum, and there's the steel. Same concept. Just like the American military, your German field equipment was meant to be modular, so that you could position it where you felt it was best to be. However, once again, it was a bit more efficient than what the Americans used. Where the American cartridge belt had the series of holes and was made of cotton, you're rather limited to where you could place your equipment. With the German system, it was much more flexible. For the uniforms that I showed previously, I meant to point out there were some aluminum hooks on the uniform. There were one here, and there were two more in the back by the position of your left and right kidneys. That was designed so that you took your belt, put on those hooks, and attached it, it would disperse your weight. So, I have here examples of items that would have been attached to this belt. And the first one I'd like to go over is right here. This is the German equivalent of the American cartridge belt. This particular pouch is made of leather, and this would have been for the German rifle. Very similar to the cartridge belt that was used by the Americans in World War II, the Germans had this for their rifle. It was made of leather, slid on, and the ammunition was on a stripper clip for the Mauser rifle. These happen to be, once again, dummy rounds, they're fake. But just like the Springfield rifle, a stripper clip had 5 cartridges. There were 10 cartridges in each pouch, so the German infantryman could carry 60 of them on his belt. The other item that would have been attached to the belt is this. In English, it's called a bread bag. Once again, it's based on the design the Germans used in World War I. This would be similar to that haversack that the Americans had, the difference being that you didn't attach your belt to it. But in my opinion, it was a bit more versatile. It was usually made of linen, also in cotton. And as you can see, it had 2 attachment points where you put your mess tin, which you ate out of. Also here, the canteen. One distinctive difference between the German canteen and the American canteen had a wool cover. Once again, so that the water, as it would sweat, would go off and cool it. Also had a cup, had a leather strap. The German mess tin was two parts. It was made of aluminum for the most part, and as you can see, it had a leather strap. When you open the bag, you had a strap that went right here to hold the contents, and the bag had two compartments in it. It was not uncommon for an American soldier, because you got to remember, once again, war's over, third week, May 1945, and this stuff is all over the country, to find one of these, as it is right here, as well as items in it that the German soldier would have carried. And I'm going to go over those items real quick. They're down here. The items that the German soldier carried obviously were a little bit different than that of the American soldier. Where with the M1 Garand rifle, the items to clean the rifle were contained within the bottom of the rifle, called the butt stock. For the German soldier, it was different. It came in a tin. And when you lift it one part, you have the contents of the tin. What you would have had, where if you remember the Garand cleaning rod I showed, now of course I got to take all this stuff out and it's not cooperating. Which it'll be easier to do this way. You had this little link right here. It was generally aluminum, and what you would have done is taken it out, your kit, there we go. Now it's working. There was a hook at the end, which you would attach one of two items. In this particular case, you can see it's a brush that you pull through the bore of the rifle. You could take the brush off, and there's a hole right here. You put a piece of cloth to then pull through the rifle. Notice it's flexible. The other piece that was contained within it, you'd think it'd be easier to get out, but it's a bit old, would have been a long cylinder that had oil in it. And there was also a tool right here that was used to take apart the bolt of the rifle. At the other end, where the Americans used a cloth square, the Germans used these. Basically long pieces of cloth. And that was kept at the base of the rifle cleaning kit. Another item that the German soldier carried was this. It was a container made of material called bakelite. And when you opened it up, what you would have put in here is fat. It's usually either goose fat, in most cases it was pork fat. Why? It was used for cooking. Some of the other items that you would find in there, this particular case, it's actually a bar soap, right there. We also have right here, just as I illustrated with the American items, you have a sewing kit. So just like the American equivalent, you have fabric, thread, needles, buttons, safety pins, everything that you would have had in the same kit, repeated uniform as the American. There were a few items that you would have purchased privately, just like the American soldier would. One item that was very popular was this, Choco Cola. It was a chocolate that had caffeine in it. Came in a metal tin, and the chocolate was in little squares, so obviously you take it off and then you would eat it. The other item here is a brand of fruit beverage, Kool-Aid, essentially, that you could add to pour the water out of your canteen, put it in your cup, and you had a fruit-flavored drink. Just like the Americans 80 years ago, obviously people smoked back then, consumed tobacco. So this is an example of a case that you'd open up, roll your cigarettes, place them in here, and they'd be protected. And then right here we have a pack of, well, You can see it right there. Got a pack of matches. Another piece of equipment the German soldier had, and the American had one also, was a flashlight. What's distinctive about the German flashlight is that it had 3 different colored lenses, and the reason for it was that at night, red, blue, and green would not be as bright as using the white light. The German flashlight also had a slot right here at the top. That was a map light. So at night, if you had to read your map, you had a very thin piece of white light you could hold down to your map and look at it. Another distinctive feature was that on the top of it, you could click it and do Morse code. If you needed the flashlight to be on all the time, you just clicked it and it was on. You notice there's 2 leather tabs right here. Why is that? In addition to being extremely versatile, if you had to work at something and you needed a light, all you did was you took the flashlight, and as you can see right here, you could button it on uniform, attach the lower button right here, and then turn the flashlight on and bend and have the light where you need it to be and have your 2 hands. So essentially you didn't have to have someone hold your flashlight. There was another distinctive item that the German soldier had in this bag, and it was this. It's a folding metal stove made of steel, made by a company called Esbit. As an aside, the company's still in business, and the German military today is still using this. When you opened up the stove, you would have had contained in it these little tablets. It was a type of compressed fuel. And all you did was put your fuel right there. You took a match to it, and whatever you wanted to heat. And I'll go over this in just a moment. German mess tin. So if you had something you wanted to heat up, you lit your tab, you had your stove, you put your mess tin on top of it, and you could heat it. One of the distinctive features about this fuel was that it gave off a very light blue light. Why is that significant? Because you could use a stove at night, any time of the year, and the flame was undetectable. So, over our German mess tin. German mess tin was based and designed from World War I. It was made of aluminum. Later in the war, it was made from steel. It had 2 parts to it. It had a handle right here. Of course, now it's late at night and I've got to demonstrate it. But as you can see right here on the handle, there's a little notch. Why is that? With that little notch, as you can see with my finger, you could hold 2 or more of these in each of your hands. Notice it has a slight taper to it right here so that it could be attached to your bread bag. Rations in the German army was entirely different from the American army. The German army essentially lived off the land, and that everything they had to eat they acquired locally. A large part of what they ate was a stew. We call it a goulash. So basically what you have on the bottom part here is a little pot. So when you went to get your meal, they put the stew in it, and then usually in the lid would be whatever the other meal you were going to have. As I mentioned with this piece here, if you had to fry something up, you had some fat that you could place into the lid, place it on your Esbit stove, and then heat the item. As a side, the German army continued to use this style of mess tin up until the 1970s. As I illustrated earlier with the Americans, when you had your mess kit, you had a fork, knife, and spoon. A little bit different in the German army. They had this item right here. It's a fork, obviously, with a spoon, but it had a rivet. It's made of aluminum, and as you can see, you could put it together like that. At your fork, eat. You could flip it rather quickly. You had your spoon. Another piece of equipment that they had I think it was adopted around 1943, was this. Made of stainless steel. Very simple to open. You pushed it. You had a spoon. You had a fork. More importantly, this time you had a knife. Unlike the American knife that didn't have an edge, notice right here, there's some indentations on the side of it. It's still not sharp, but it'll cut. Another distinctive feature was the item that it went into. It had built into it a can opener, but more importantly, right there, you had a bottle opener. This is an army that's thinking. You're thirsty, you have a beer, guess what you have to open your beer? You've got your bottle opener right there. So, this is a canteen cup, obviously, right on top of your canteen. Where the American one had the piece that came and flipped, the German one was a little bit simpler. You had two little items right there, and there's your cup. Last time I'd like to cover is over here, and that would have been, well, a few more items here. Just like their counterpart in the American Army, the German Army had the bayonet for the rifle. One of the big differences is that much of your German field equipment was made of leather. Why? The Germans had quite a bit of it. It was usually made from cattle. They also used pigskin. So in this particular case, we have our bayonet. As you can see, it has a loop. Would have went on the belt. To remove the bayonet, you would have lifted this tab, pulled it out. There's a groove there. Went on the end of your rifle. You'd click it, and there's a button there to release it. If you watch the item I had on the American bayonet, the German bayonet also has a groove that's known as a blood groove. The only difference between these two bayonets is that it's designed this piece right here called the carrier. What we have over here is a leather pouch that would have attached to this belt that was used by the operator of the German MG-34 or 42 machine gun. Made of leather. Once again, you have the loops. There's an attachment to go to these straps, which I'll go over in just a moment. I'm not going to open it up, but what you would have had contained in here is some extra parts for your machine gun, specifically a spare bolt. You would have had a can to oil it. You would have had the items to clean it. You'll notice right here, this piece right here. It was initially made of asbestos. Then later in the war, they went to a heavy piece of wool. The purpose of this was that when it came time to change the barrel on your machine gun, you took it off the pouch, you put it on your hand so that you could then pull out the barrel and put it back in. With the American, if you look at the stuff that I had on the American uniforms with the cartridge belt, you notice there were a pair of straps that went over it. The Germans had the same. However, theirs were made of leather. They had similar attachment points. They also had the same rings that were like the letter D. Where the Americans had the holes, these straps, as you can see, there's a piece right here that would have slid underneath it and would have attached it. In addition to holding the weight of your belt, that A-frame over here would have attached to these two pieces also here. The Germans also had a pack that was similar to the American haversack. It would have also attached to those 2 points right there. So, last items I'd like to go over is over here, and it's some items that would have or equivalent to the ID book that I had for the American soldier. German soldier was issued an item that in German is called the soul book. Very similar to the American ID book. Obviously, it's much larger. You would have had entered it into your first name, last name, where you were born, next of kin, as well as details like your height and weight. But unlike the American ID book, this one also had an area for all of the equipment you were issued to. If you had a pair of prescription eyeglasses, it would have had the prescription in here, your blood type. If you had to go see a doctor, it was in here. Every piece of equipment you were issued, okay, was in here. Every military award that you received was in this book. So your entire military service was contained in this book. Now there was an area in the back of it right here where additional documents could be placed. So, in this particular case, we have think of it as a wallet. There's a photograph, all right, a group of German soldiers outside of a barracks. If you're Roman Catholic, you may recognize this item, and it's a card for someone who passed. So it has the soldier's name, has his picture on there, and some information about him, where he was born and where he died. We also have an example here of a postcard that someone received. And we also have in the back of it money. In this case, it's some various denominations of different paper bills. This is German Army. German Navy also had the same document. This particular case, it usually had a heavy cardboard sleeve, but obviously when you're taking it in and out, generally these are difficult to find. But this one here is for the German Navy. Same idea. But it had all your personal details in here, your name, where you're born, once again, family, all the equipment that was issued to you, all the schools you attained, your medical record. As you can see in this particular one, also in the back, we have a certificate. Let me look at it. This one is for a person who qualified as a Marine artilleryman. So this is a certificate that would have went with that little badge and that little uniform I showed you. Also here, we have some examples of money that would have been included in this. This document was extremely important to the United States military for when they captured a German soldier, because once again it told you everything you want to know about the guy. I mean, literally everything. So for intelligence value, these were extremely important. And obviously, if you're a German soldier, you did not want to lose this, because everything about your time in service was in this little book. The last item I'd like to go over here is the German identification disc, where previously mentioned the Americans had one that was made of stainless steel. It would have had your first name, your last name, your blood type, your religious affiliation on it. There were two of it on a metal chain. The Germans had the equivalent item. The difference is that for the German disc, it was one disc. It was usually made of zinc, in some cases of aluminum. It would have had your blood type, it would have had your service number, and had the unit that you served with. It did not have your name on it. The German tag, as you can see here, piece of cloth, wore it around your neck. You notice this in two parts. The intention of that was that if you were killed in combat, or even weren't killed in combat, it was designed to be broken like this. You take your hand, break it in two pieces. One piece would stay with the body, the other piece was then taken forward to, obviously say, hey, unfortunate circumstances, Father, Son, Holy Ghost determined your time was up, and that's how they identified the person. Well, if they were able to go back and retrieve the person's remains. So that's a quick overview of the typical souvenirs that an American soldier in Western Europe would have picked up and brought home, or either shipped home. So there's two other items I'd like to do real quick, and that's a quick overview of some German military awards and decorations. And what I'd like to do is quickly put together all this German field equipment just like I did for the American cartridge belt, so you have an idea of what it looks like.